everybody! Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing amazing as always. And today I thought it would be fun, you know, since spring is coming up, to do a little get ready with me video where I chat with you guys about some of my favorite spring movies. Before we get started, I just wanted to say quick things about these movies that I picked. They're all primarily old Hollywood films, except for maybe an exception of like one that kind of isn't. But these are all films that I feel are a little bit underrated when it comes to old Hollywood movies in general, but also when it comes to movies in spring. For me, spring is a time of flowers and beautiful scenery and love and birth and all sorts of things. So that's primarily what I base these movies on, and I will tell you guys all about these movies. They're some of my favorites. You know, some of them are comedies, some of them are children's films, some of them are genres, and a lot of them are musicals. So yeah, if you'd like to see what movies I recommend, keep on watching this video. And the look I'm kind of going for today is more of just like a fresh spring sort of look, because that's sort of what I've been liking to do at the moment, just something sort of light that I won't sweat off because it's really hot where I am. So yeah. Alright, so the first movie I have on this list is one of my absolute favorites from when I was a kid, and one that I still watch a lot nowadays, and that is Hans Christian Andersen, which was made in 1952, I believe, and it stars Danny Kaye. Now, I kind of chose this movie for spring because it is so bright, so colorful. It has some of the most gorgeous backgrounds and I have seen in a movie, and it's in Technicolor, so it's very bright and beautiful, and all around it's just such a really great, fun little sweet movie. It stars Danny Kaye, who you might know from White Christmas and plenty of other films. He's such a big star. The film is so much fun. Basically, in the beginning of this film, they give a little intro that you can read, and it kind of explains what this movie's about, or kind of what it's based on. They kind of tell you that it's not really like a biopic of Hans Christian Andersen. It's more like a retelling of his life as if it were a fairy tale, if that makes sense. So some statements are true, some of them are played up to kind of seem more like a fairy tale. And for anyone who doesn't know who Hans Christian Andersen is, he was a writer back, I think, in the 1800s. And, you know, with that being said, this movie is basically about the person of Hans Christian Andersen, who's played by Danny Kaye. He gets kicked out of this town that he's living in because he is telling too many fairy tales to the kids when they should be going to school. And so his little apprentice, because he's a shoemaker, kind of convinces him to go over to Copenhagen to start his own little business there and get some inspiration for some more stories, etc. And so he goes to Copenhagen, where he kind of gets employed at a ballet company making ballet shoes, and he ends up falling in love with the lead dancer. And from there he sort of writes The Little Mermaid for her. And there's this really great number where they're doing this whole like 20-minute ballet sequence where they're dancing The Little Mermaid, which is so beautiful and so fun. I absolutely love it so much. But that's basically the basic plot of the film. Like I said, it's really great for kids. I think it's really fun for adults if you really like aesthetics. So many songs and really great sweet numbers in this film where he's singing to the kids of the towns, and he's helping them learn morals and lessons by telling them little fun stories like them first new clothes and Thumbelina. And it's all really, really cute, so I really recommend that film. I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. It's just so sweet. Alright, the next the next film I want to talk about is probably one of the more underrated Rodgers and Hammerstein films I feel like there are, and that is State Fair. It came out in 1945 and starred Jeanne Crain and Dana Andrews. And is a really sweet, just little musical. I wouldn't say it's like a super complicated story. It's basically just about a girl and her brother who go to a state fair for a couple days and sort of fall in love and kind of figure out what they want to do with their lives, who they want to marry, that sort of stuff. It's a very simple plot, but what I really love about this film is the costumes. Her costumes, Jeanne Crane's costumes in this film are some of my favorite in musical history. The movie itself is very bright and colorful, and so are her costumes. She has all these gorgeous dresses. Oh my goodness, I wish I had them. She specifically has this blue dress that I would die for, and I wish I had so I can go to my own little state fair and live out my Rodgers and Hammerstein fantasies, but I don't have that. This movie is really fun. Like I said, it's very aesthetically beautiful, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who loves a good like Rodgers and Hammerstein musical. Like if you're a fan of Carousel or Oklahoma, I think you'd really like State Fair. The next one on my list is one of my all-time favorite movies, just like ever. And it is I Love Melvin, starring Debbie Reynolds and Donald O'Connor. Now, I love these two so much. One of my all-time favorite movies is Singing in the Rain, and so that's where I was introduced to Debbie Reynolds and Donald O'Connor, and I really, really love this movie. It is so great. Basically, the plot is that Donald O'Connor is a photographer for a magazine, and he goes out and sort of falls in love with this girl who is Debbie Reynolds' character, who wants to be like a star. She wants to be on Broadway, she wants to sing and dance and act and all that fun stuff, and Donald O'Connor kind of comes up to her and lies and says that he can get her on the cover of a really big magazine. And of course she believes him, and she just absolutely falls head over heels for him because he can get her into this magazine. And you know, along the way they really do fall in love, and you know, as you can imagine, stuff happens and it kind of all goes downhill from there. But this is just a really nice musical comedy, musical romance comedy, I would say, that is really, really fun and really, really sweet and very, very underrated. Like, this musical has some of the best dancing numbers I've ever seen, and as you can imagine, it's Donald O'Connor. He is one of the best dancers to ever exist, in my opinion. And there's just so many numbers that are just so unique and so different that I just have never seen before. Like, for example, there is this one number that he does sort of towards the middle of the film, where he and this little girl are in this pavilion and they're singing and dancing, and all of a sudden he puts on a pair of roller skates and starts tap dancing in them. And it's just something that you don't, like, that's not something you see very often in films, and it's just so great. You really get to see his dancing shine in this film, and also just his acting ability, because I feel like in Spring Awakening, what am I saying? I feel like in Singing in the Rain, we didn't get a lot of Donald O'Connor. He, yes, of course, had Make Him Laugh and, you know, a couple of numbers here and there, but I feel like we didn't get to see as much of him as I would have liked. And so to see him in this film really shine and be like a romantic lead, and to really show off his dancing in very unique ways, is really, really great to see. And on the other side of that, we get some beautiful, beautiful singing from Debbie Reynolds, and you know, there's a really, 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 really fun number where she, early on in the film, plays a football in this little play that she's doing, and it's a whole dance number where she's being thrown around by all these guys, and it's so fun. Like, there's just some really great numbers in this film, and one of my all-time favorite outfits ever to be worn in Hollywood history is in this film, and that is this little green dress that she wears in this film. When I tell you, if I could have any sort of costume in Hollywood history, it'd be this dress. I'm not even kidding. I love this dress and I love this number. And overall, it's just such a really sweet, funny film that I feel like just doesn't get talked about enough, and it's so good. And if you're to watch anything on this list, I highly recommend I Love Melvin. It is so, so good. And while speaking of Debbie Reynolds, another one of my favorite films of hers is called Bundle of Joy. This is a movie that came out in about 1956 with her and her then husband Eddie Fisher. And basically the movie, I find, is very, very funny. It's a musical comedy, but it's also kind of risque for its time, because it's about Debbie Reynolds' character who works sort of at a department store, kind of like a Macy's in New York City, and she one day gets fired from work, and on her way home after being fired, she finds a baby just in the middle of the street. And so of course she goes and tries to give it to an orphanage, etc. And everybody thinks she's the mother of this child and tries to convince her to keep the baby and just to give the baby another chance. You know, they think she's a single mother. So she has no choice but to take the baby home with her. And from there, Eddie Fisher kind of comes along and discovers that she has this baby and kind of gives her job back and kind of raises her salary, all these really great things to kind of make her life a little bit better. And everything that she needs to kind of survive in New York City by herself. So she decides to keep the baby so that way she can get all these benefits and have a job, etc. And, you know, along the way, of course, she falls in love with this baby and at the same time falls in love with Eddie Fisher. And, you know, everybody in the movie thinks Eddie Fisher's the father of the baby, so there's that confusion. And it's just so funny. It's so sweet. There's some really great songs in it. And honestly, for its time, it's kind of risque because it has a lot of sex jokes and a lot of moments talking about premarital sex and all sorts of stuff, but kind of like in a 1950s way where they're not explicitly saying any of that, you know? But what I find interesting about this film is that it came out in 1956. At this point, Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher had been married for a little bit, and the year 1956, when this movie came out, was the year they had their daughter, Carrie Fisher, who some of you might know as Princess Leia. And I just find that an interesting fact. I just wonder if that was something that Hollywood sort of planned for the couple. You know, did they plan for them to kind of have the baby that year, or did they know they were about to have the baby, or that they were trying and then made this movie? Because I just find it a little bit of a coincidence that, you know, this movie sort of happened. But yeah, that's another really great one to check out if you love Debbie Reynolds and movie musicals. The next couple movies on this list are probably ones that you have heard of and maybe have seen. They're a little bit more popular than the other ones on this list. But that is The Father of the Bride, as well as Father's Little Dividend. Now, The Father of the Bride is a movie that keeps getting remade. Like, this past year they just had one on HBO Max be remade, and then of course we have the one from the 90s. But what I don't think some people know is that there are two movies from the 1950s that started it all. It's just as good, just as funny as the Steve Martin ones. And you know, this film stars so many big names. Elizabeth Taylor, Spencer Tracy, Joan Bennett, Billy Burke. I mean, the list just goes on and on for the stars in this film. And, you know, if you've never seen these films, this film is about basically Spencer Tracy's character whose daughter is getting married. It's basically this whole narrative of a father's relationship to his daughter and trying to let her go, and, you know, the bond that a father-daughter has. That's basically the whole premise of this film. It's a comedy, so lots of hijinks ensues about the wedding and just funny stuff that, you know, like dads don't understand why, you know, everything needs to be so expensive, or why their daughter acts different once they find a boy, you know, all these sort of things. And it's really, really funny. And can I just say, Elizabeth Taylor's wedding dress in this film is just gorgeous. I love her wedding dress so much in this film. But, you know, after the first film, about a year later, they came out with Father's Little Dividend, which is basically Father of the Bride Part 2, where Elizabeth Taylor's character ends up having a baby. And, you know, sort of the hijinks of Spencer Tracy's character becoming a grandfather and sort of seeing his little girl grow up and become a mother, that sort of stuff. That's basically what it's about, and it's also really funny. You know, I think these are really great films to watch in spring because, you know, is it spring where it's like wedding season? Is that wedding season? I don't know. But I think spring weddings are really, really pretty, and so these films are really great to watch for around this season. And then talking about Elizabeth Taylor, there's another film of hers from early on in her career that I really, really like, called A Date with Judy. Now, A Date with Judy used to be a radio show back in the 40s, and it's basically just about a girl named Judy who... Oh no! My makeup just fell. The movie came out in 1948, and basically what the film is about is Jane Powell's character Judy and her best friend, who is Elizabeth Taylor. They kind of have this frenemy relationship, but anyways, it's just a bunch of stories, but ultimately Jane unknowingly catches her father cheating on her mother, or so she thinks, and kind of try to like rat him out, catch him in the act, kind of get proof that he's cheating, and that's kind of like the main story. It's a bunch of different stories in one, but it's really, really fun. It's really, really great. I like it for springtime because it's about romance, young love, dating, all that sort of fun stuff. It has some really funny moments, and there is some singing in here. I wouldn't say it's a musical because it's not like State Fair where they're singing a lot and the songs like help move the plot. It's basically just a couple songs, like probably 3 or 4 songs here or there, just to kind of have music, basically. But one thing in this film that I really did like is seeing Carmen Miranda. She is kind of like a guest star in this film, and she has some really beautiful costumes, some really beautiful dancing, and this is just a really great fun film if you just want something that's not super serious and just really fun and kind of teenagery and rom-com-ish, if that makes sense. Next on this list is kind of one that's a little bit similar, and one that I've never heard anybody talk about. Like, I just came across this movie when I was young because I was in a big Shirley Temple phase, and nobody talks about this movie at all. But it's called Miss Annie Rooney. It came out in 1942. And this is a movie that Shirley Temple did later in her life, because this is kind of like an in-between stage for her, because she was a really big child star back in the 30s, etc. But when she hit about 14, 15, you know, her career started going a little bit more downhill because she wasn't that cute little girl anymore. So this was kind of her first big, like, adult, I'm not going to say adult film. This was kind of her first big teenage film where she was playing someone her age who wasn't like a cutesy little character. The film is about her character, Annie Rooney, who is 14 years old and starting to develop crushes, and she longs for romance. And, you know, one day she's out jitterbugging and sort of comes across this guy who is rich, he has money, and they sort of fall in love. Or in love, it's like puppy love. But she is invited to this really fancy celebration over at his house, and the dynamic is basically that, you know, Annie Rooney's family, it's just her dad, and her grandfather, and they don't have a lot of money. They're really struggling. And, you know, she wants all these things like dresses and something to really show herself off and not make her seem poor at this gathering that she's been invited to. And then on the flip side, you know, his parents don't really want him associating or developing crushes on someone who isn't quote-unquote worthy for their family. So it's really this whole big dynamic of privileged versus poor, and it's just a really, really sweet film. It has comedic moments, and it has some romance, and it has some drama too, and it's a very, very sweet film. And I don't know why it doesn't get talked about enough. It is so, so good. I really highly recommend this film to anyone who just wants a good, like, 1940s little comedy drama. And, you know, this film is kind of hard to find. I know you can find it, last I checked, you can find it free on YouTube, or you can do what I did and just buy it for like $8 on Amazon for like a physical DVD copy. And the next film is one that I feel like a lot of people probably have heard of, but maybe not have necessarily seen. So let me down below know, you know, if you've seen this movie, because it's one of my all-time favorite movies ever. And that is The Red Shoes. I love The Red Shoes so much. It's a film that I grew up watching. It came out in 1948, and it stars, let me see if I can get it right, Maura Shearer, who was a really famous ballet dancer in Scotland and sort of became a movie star once this film came out. And the whole plot of this film is, it follows a girl named Victoria who all her life has dreamed of becoming a ballet dancer, and finally gets into the corps de ballet of a ballet company in Paris, and they travel around doing ballets. And then one day, she kind of gets the opportunity to star in one of the ballets, and she becomes a sensation and starts doing more leading roles in the films. And, you know, at the same time, she is also falling more and more in love with this guy who works in the orchestra for the ballet company. And in the end, it is this really great struggle and dynamic of her character trying to figure out what she wants out of life. You know, does she want love? Does she want to be with this guy that she has fallen in love with and start a life together? Or does she want to do what she has always wanted to do, which was, you know, to dance and do ballet and do her passion for a living? And that's sort of what it ultimately comes down, is her having to make that decision and find out and sort of figure out her life, basically. But I put this film on this list because for some reason I love ballet in the spring. Like, springtime is when I usually watch all my favorite ballets and movies, and I start doing ballet classes again, etc. And so this film just always brings me back to one of my first passions, which was ballet. And this film is darker, I would say. It's not a lighthearted film at all, and it's kind of lengthy, but it's a very, very good story, and I love the dancing in this film. There's this gorgeous, gorgeous dance sequence where they perform Hans Christian Andersen's The Red Shoes, which is just great. It's like a 15-minute sequence of them just doing this beautiful dancing. There's really gorgeous shots within the film for that scene. Like, there's one where she's kind of weaving in and out of these papers, and it's just so, so fun and so heartbreaking. The ending is truly heartbreaking. Also, the costumes are absolutely gorgeous. There's lots of theatrical makeup. It's all kind of weird. And then you have some really beautiful costumes worn by Nora Shearer, who is just absolutely gorgeous to begin with. She has red hair, and she's absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, I would highly recommend this film if you want sort of like a really like dramatic, sort of tragic story. It's so good. And it's on HBO Max, I believe, if you want to check it out. Right, the next film I'm going to talk about is one that is severely underrated, one of my personal favorites from when I was a kid, and it's called The Unfinished Dance. And it came out in 1947, I want to say. And it stars Margaret OBrien, Danny Thomas, Sid Charisse, who is such a gorgeous dancer, and she is just gorgeous in general. Also, there's a little side character in the film played by Eleanor Donahue. If you're a big, you know, Father's Newest Best fan or a Andy Griffith fan, you know who she is. This film, it basically is about Margaret OBrien, who dreams of being a ballerina and goes to this prestigious ballet school where there is this girl who is like in the company of that ballet school who is the lead, and she's everything that Margaret OBrien dreams of. And so Margaret OBrien one day during performance gets really, really jealous of Sid Charisse's character, who is like the main ballet star, and kind of causes an accident to happen that injures Sid Charisse's character. And, you know, the whole time Margaret OBrien is in turmoil because, you know, in the heat of the moment, this is what she wanted to do. She wanted to take over Sid Charisse's spot and kind of have that life for herself. But once it's done, she's in this absolute turmoil that she could have done that to somebody, especially somebody that she has respected. And along the way, she kind of gets threatened that somebody knows who hurt this dancer, and the whole time, you know, Margaret OBrien is just in absolute distress about it. And it's just a dramatic film, but it is very, very good, and I highly recommend it if you're into dancing films or dramatic films, or maybe something a little more lighthearted than The Red Shoes, but you still want that dancing, dramatic sort of feel. I highly recommend it. Alright, I am done with my makeup, but I am going to continue on with this list and kind of just give you guys my last two little recommendations, then I'll do a little outfit of the day sort of thing, and then the video will be over. But the next film I have on this list is Pollyanna from 1960. This film stars Hayley Mills, who was a big Disney star at the time. She did like Parent Trap, all these really great stuff. It's about this little girl who moves in with her Aunt Polly, and, you know, it's just about her journey living in this new town, and of course, you know, stuff arises that causes trouble, and, you know, she is really cheerful and just tries to bring good graces to everybody. That's basically the whole film. I mean, there's not like a super main plot, I would say. It's just a really great film. But this kind of takes place in like the turn of the century, so everything is still very old and very rustic, and there's some beautiful shots of scenery, and the outfits are just absolutely gorgeous. And also there's a little character played by Agnes Moorehead who just makes me happy. You know, if you've seen Bewitched, you know who she is. And yeah, it's just a really fun, really great film. Alright, the final film is kind of a little bit of cheat. It's not an old Hollywood film, but this is one film that I watch a lot in spring that I feel like is very, very underrated. And I feel like everyone should give this movie a shot. And that is Alice in Wonderland. And it's not the one that you're thinking of. I'm thinking of the one from 1985 that is a made-for-TV two-parter movie. Just absolutely brilliant. And I laugh because it just makes me really, really happy. And also it's a little bit ridiculous, but in the best, like, 80s way possible, if that makes sense. But basically, it's just the story of Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. Surprisingly kind of accurate to the books and stuff, I'm not gonna lie. But one of the reasons I put this on this list for like movies I watch in spring is because the colors are just very vibrant, very pretty. There's lots of beautiful flowers and trees. And it was made in the 80s for like TV, so of course the costumes are practical, they're not CGI or anything, and that just makes me laugh so much. So I think the best part is definitely the guest stars that are in here. There are so many guest stars, so many old Hollywood guest stars in here, and I put like a little list together of just some of them so you can get a taste for it. So Carol Channing is in here, who is an absolute Broadway legend. You have Ringo Starr dressed as the Mock Turtle, which will forever make me laugh. One of the most iconic moments is Sammy Davis Jr. as being the caterpillar, and he does this tap dancing rap, which you have to look up. It is amazing. And then of course, you know, another great moment is they're doing the caucus race, and in the background, you know, you have old Hollywood stars and legends like Shelley Winters and Donald O'Connor, who are in these outrageous costumes, who are kind of dancing around like that the whole time. They don't get really any lines, they're just kind of there, and it's just so funny to see that. And then also, you know, Pat Morra, Scott Baio, they're in there. And then, of course, my favorite moment in the whole film is John Stamos from Full House and Harvey Korman from The Carol Burnett Show singing The Lion and the Unicorn. That is my absolute favorite moment in this whole two-parter made-for-TV movies. So I highly recommend them. They are 80s-tastic and super fun and just such a great time. If you're a fan of Alice in Wonderland, if you just want some really beautiful aesthetics, or if you just want some weird 80s made-for-TV moments, I highly recommend it. So yeah, those are all my films. I'm gonna go get dressed and I'll be right back to show you my outfit, and yeah, I'll be back in one moment. Alright, I'm back. Alright, and all I did, today's outfit is very, very simple because it's just a nice day outside. I didn't want anything too heavy or too light, and I've just been really liking this dress lately. I got it from Hearts and Found, and you probably have seen it a couple times on this channel. And then all I did was I twisted my hair back. But yeah, that's the end of this video. I will link all products and movies that I mentioned down below. And yeah, I hope you guys just have a really wonderful, amazing day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!